Hello and welcome to Mixologist. What I'm going to be doing on this video is I'm going to be sharing 5 tips of how to be more effective and productive when you are working on customer units. So when somebody sends you something to repair and you send it back to them. And these are things that I've learned over, well, I've been doing this for 10 years now. So I've learned it over the years. How do I work better so that I can be more effective when I'm working with especially vintage speed equipment that is something that you've worked for the first time, or it's slightly obscure, or you don't know very well. So these are my 5 tips that would help you kind of avoid kind of a mental institution and make you more productive in less time. So tip number 1 concerns when you get the equipment in. So either you're taking it out of the box, or you bought it and you bought it home. Now, well, the first thing you need to do is always try and take some pictures of the item. I've got this camera here. It's an old camera, but it's good enough. Or alternatively, pretty much everybody nowadays has a phone with a camera. So, and also this applies to bits that, for example, you haven't worked on before, and you want to really document how it was, the condition that it was. For example, this Scintilla Vertex magneto, which is going to come on the channel. I'm going to do some videos about it, but for this one, it's very important that as I continue with the disassembly process of this unit, that I take pictures at every stage, so then I know roughly how it goes back. And if I get stuck when I'm reassembling the unit, I can always go back to my pictures and find out what's the way it came kind of out of the box. So that's tip number 1. So, rule number 2 is something that I call bag and crate. So whenever I'm working on a carburetor or a project or something, what I tend to do is, when I am disassembling the carb for the first time, what I do is all the different parts that I take off the unit, they go into one of these like Ziploc bags that you can securely close them, and all the larger pieces of the carburetor, obviously after I've taken pictures, they go into this I've got a different kind of plastic crates. And the good thing with the plastic crates is that I can lock them, and this has 2 advantages. So advantage number 1 is that I keep all the pieces together in one place, which is important because you don't want to start running around the workshop trying to hunt for parts. And B, it also keeps this from dirt or dust or anything, so it actually does protect the unit. So it does make a lot of sense to keep them like this. It will allow you to be more productive. Number 3. So tip number 3 is something that I'm gonna call scrub first, and basically it's the following. When you are working with units that you haven't either got a lot of experience, or you're doing it for the first time, it's always helpful if you can get either a scrap unit of the same or similar model, certainly of the same make, and start with that. Why? Because I'll give you an example with this Zenith carburetor. So I got this unit in a lot of carbs, and I want to obviously refurbish them and make them run perfectly. Now, in order for me to do that, what I am going to do is I'm going to start with this one, that is kind of the roughest. Why? Because starting with this one is going to allow me to find out what are the main characteristics of the unit, how were they built, what are the parts that require kind of more force taken out, what are the parts that could get stuck, and that kind of stuff. So obviously, if you've got the opportunity, always start with the roughest part first, and that will allow you to get yourself experience and knowledge about how do these things work, in order to be then more effective if a customer sends you kind of their parts, their carburetors and that kind of stuff. You would already know how these things work and how they were built initially. Now, this is rule number 4, and I've said it many times in a lot of previous videos, but it's the importance of spare parts. So when you're working with vintage equipment, vintage carburetors and all sorts of other things, sometimes when you buy items, sometimes you might not be able to refurbish them or make them work again. If that is the case, what you need to do is you need to harvest as much spare parts as you possibly humanly can. And I'm going to use this carburetor as an example. So I have got this kind of throttle shaft from a Carter YB that I tried to free off, and obviously it didn't work. But the lever was in really good condition, so I kept it. And lo and behold, on this Zenith carb and this carb, they have a shaft that is the same diameter. So therefore, I am going to be able to adapt this arm to this carb. Now, this wouldn't have been possible if I have not kept the parts. So it is really important when you're working with these things, always have parts and have them. And it's important that you have them catalogued correctly. So, because again, from a productivity point of view, you don't want to start kind of running around your shop, kind of hunting for parts and that kind of stuff. They need to be, if you're going to keep parts, they need to be suitably labeled and in places that you know exactly where they are, because that is going to save you a lot of time and hassle. Now, fifth and final top tip. I've got this magneto, this Lucas RS1, as an illustration, because it's the following. My tip is manuals or literature. So this is an exploded view, for example, of a Holley 1-barrel carb. There's nothing to do with this. And this is a instruction manual for a Vertex Scintilla magneto, which is this one. So always try and obtain as much literature as you possibly can of the unit that you're about to assemble. Why? Because, especially at least the exploded view, which is absolutely fundamental when you work with this sort of things. So why? Because remember at the beginning of the video I told you that it was important to keep record, to take some snaps of how the unit came to you. The problem with that is that sometimes the units that come to you are assembled incorrectly. So you can't assume that they were always assembled correctly. And here's where kind of having a manual and exploded view will allow you to determine if they were done correctly or not. So in the case of this particular Maggie, one of the problems that he had, that I spotted it because I worked with them a bit, so I know this, is that one of the insulators in here was incorrectly placed. So it was placed here rather than here, if you can see it. Now, in this particular Maggie, if you haven't got the insulators in the right places, the thing is not going to work. Now, obviously, if I've taken pictures and assembled it right as it came from the box, so to speak, I would be doing this. It would be incorrect, so it wouldn't work. So that's why it is important to, when you're doing this sort of thing, to have a manual or an exploded view when you're reassembling the unit, so that you know that you're doing it properly. So so that brings us to the end of the video. I hope you got something out of it. If you want me to do some different video or anything, just put it down in the comments. I'll try to do it as quickly as I can. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.